everyone. Thank you for joining us. I would like to welcome you to our fireside chat where you'll learn insider details about the online MSN to DNP program and its outcomes. Today, myself, my name is Alicia Singh. I'm one of the graduate admissions advisor at Regis College, and I do support a lot of our DNP programs, specifically the Nurse Education program. And my role is to work with students to ensure the program is a good fit for them, answer their questions, but also help them through the application process and work with them all the way up until the beginning of classes. In our discussion today, we have James Papesca joining us. He is an adjunct faculty member at Regis College. He is also a recent graduate of the MSN DNP Nurse Education program. And Jamie, I would like for you to introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about yourself as well.
Sure, Alicia, thank you for this opportunity. I'm going on to my 25th year of nursing now. So, it's never too late to go into school, and you can teach an old dog new tricks. I'll definitely say that. I graduated from a bachelor's program, like I said, many, many years ago on the East Coast. And then I went right into critical care nursing in Texas. Obviously, it's where I'm located now. So once again, I took advantage of this online opportunity that Regis had. I was in critical care for probably about 10-ish or so years in a surgery trauma ICU. So I didn't have any type of educational elements, thrown at me. I took advantage of what nursing had to offer. And so I went into some organ transplant, and in the prime of my youth, I would say, I got to travel around the country and talk to patients, recover organs. And at that time, I felt like it's about to settle down and kind of grow up a little bit. And so I went back to school and I got my degree in nurse anesthesia. I specialized, ironically, in women's health, which was really kind of outside of my area of specialty and practice. I got involved in every type of GYN procedure and OB procedure. And eventually I married a Texan. And so you end up back in Texas. Like I said, we were kind of all over the place. Once I kind of hit Texas, it was probably the first time in my career that I was not involved with students. When I was in the ICU working, I always had some nursing student or a new orientee. When I graduated from the anesthesia program and I was working in OB anesthesia, I had a lot of students that would come through and rotate, and I took a clinical coordinator position for one of the anesthesia programs. Mm-hmm. But when I relocated back to Texas, really kind of my first opportunity of not having a student, and I missed it. And I wanted to kind of look for something, and I actually found, I went old school, I looked for a newspaper ad, and I found an online opportunity at a local university, and I kind of got involved with that. And here I am many years later. Obviously, I have my doctorate now, thank you, from Regis. I'm a full-time faculty member, and I still do anesthesia on the side to keep my skills up. I had a lot invested in that because I think obviously being clinically active just makes you a good teacher. So yeah, that's kind of my story, how I got to where I am today.
So you've definitely still kept up to date with all of your clinical practice, but still venturing into education, kind of doing the best of both worlds now.
Absolutely.
It's great to hear. Can you talk about what your educational experience at Regis College was like?
Absolutely. So this is going to be my first experience in an online program. So I wasn't quite sure what I was really looking for. I knew what I didn't want. And I didn't want to have to travel anywhere because clearly I'm far away from the Regis campus. And I was looking specifically for courses in nursing education, and Regis had a specific doctoral track in nursing education, which I knew I needed because I didn't have that foundation in my master's preparation. Once we kind of got involved into the program, once again, I was like every other student, and I really didn't know what to expect. Research was not my forte. I was afraid of it. I avoided it at all costs. And the first class you take is your evidence-based research course. And it's really interesting the way Regis has everything programmed and laid out. When you start your course, you're literally starting your doctoral-based project, which ends up being your dissertation. And to help you with that, you have a very small class size. You have your advisor, and then Regis pairs you up in a peer partner kind of system. And so it's just randomly by choice you get assigned to, and mine just was a great experience. My peer partner and I are now, really good friends, and we talk, quite frequently. What I think is interesting about it, her project was on a palliative care hospice type situation. Mine was on an evidence-based practice in anesthesia dosing patterns. So we could not have been, more polar opposites. When students always ask, something that I was concerned about as well as the volume of work, and it's intensive. I mean, it's a doctoral program, so you're going to expect some work. What was great about it is there was a very predictable pattern, and we are all, extremely motivated nurses. That's why we're, looking into these programs. The predictable pattern of the assignments. There was a lot of discussion forums, because there's a lot of interaction that you're going to learn from your peers and from your faculty member who is engaging in those conversations. An assignment was always due on a Wednesday night and then a Saturday night. And so it was very predictable. And I had the opportunity, if I knew if I was going to be out of town, if my work schedule was going to be, was going to interfere with something, then I could, work ahead if I needed to kind of get something done. So it was just nice to have. It was a semblance of control when I really didn't have control, because I didn't know about it.
Right.
And it was interesting when you start off, because like I said, you go right into your doctoral project and start developing your, I guess, what your project wants to be, the idea of your project. And you really don't know. When I wrote my application, when I wanted to get into the program, I wrote about one topic, and I ended up going a 180 down the street, turned around again and around the block, and came back. I mean, it was all over the place.
Right.
So it was really interesting to kind of see that morph, and the conversations that I would have with my faculty member, who ended up being my advisor. I really feel like he got to know where my strengths and weaknesses were, and from our conversations, where my passion was. I really didn't even know that I liked some of these things until he brought it to my attention, because I would inadvertently kind of keep referencing and talking about it. So through that, he helped me develop my project, and I had my project idea and design pretty much squared away right at the end of the first semester. And like I said, the way Regis has it all mapped out is you work through your evidence-based practice, which is your dissertation, every semester. So you're working on it when you're really not paying attention to it.
Right.
So the first semester, you're kind of getting your research idea, your question, really what you want to do, the impact you want to make. The second course, you're doing all of your literature search and your review of literature, and kind of laying the framework. Working on your IRB application, so you can start doing your research project. And once you get that kind of done and squared away and approved, then you're able to move on and start doing your research kind of at your own pace, which is really nice, because you are taking other courses when you're doing all of this. And so I was very fortunate that since I was just doing a quantitative study where I was just gathering data, I was able to do that relatively quickly. So I was able to kind of progress a little bit faster, and then I could pause for a little bit when I had some major assignments due, and then I could pick up and resume. And I was really in a great position. I finished my project and my actual script for my dissertation probably about 4 months before the end of the program. So I got to kind of kick back and relax for a little bit, and I got a little bit more time to spend on my project, my poster project, and then I was able to work on a script, my manuscript for publication, and it was just a really great experience through that. So I hope that kind of answers your question and maybe explains some of the fears that I had and didn't understand about the dissertation project.
It definitely does. And I know a lot of our students, potential students, share the same fears and, the concerns about balancing work and school, and knowing that they have this ample time to work on their project, rather than having to stick to a sort of a strict schedule that, okay, I have to finish everything within these specific courses. They have the opportunity to kind of space that out. the experiences overall. I think that's what students want to hear about, is just kind of how they can be successful, because it's a doctorate program, like you said. I mean, it's going to have a lot of research, a lot of writing, and that tends to scare a lot of students. So knowing that they can be able to balance that and still be successful, I think it's great to hear that. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, anytime.
I did want to ask about after graduation and what students can expect to come next.
Wow. Well, I think that's always a personal thing. I had a big party after graduation because you are happy to get some of your time back. I was dedicating a lot of my time, in my evenings to working on this because, like I said, we said I worked full time. I still had a family, family obligations. So yeah, I celebrated, and then I went out to kind of, pursue my dreams.
Right.
I was very fortunate to have had an opportunity already lined up for a teaching opportunity, for a faculty position. So I was able to kind of move into that, move into that. And then the opportunity arose to kind of strike up some conversations with Regis faculty. And that's how I became an adjunct with Regis. One of the great things that the university does, or the college does, is have kind of social mixers for the distance students. And I was able to travel, and I didn't have to go too far because there were a lot of people from Texas in my program. So I was able to meet some of the faculty, and administration flew out to meet us, which I thought was a great thing. I mean, they didn't have to, they really made me feel like I wasn't just a name on a screen. I knew their names, they knew me. And so I was able to kind of strike up those conversations, and I was, interviewed with them, and I must have interviewed well, because now I do some adjunct faculty work in the MSN program. I teach within my specialty, which I really think is a great technique that Regis does. And I think most online programs do, but I think it's great for Regis because that's where I have my experience. I teach, a pathophysiology course, some pharmacology courses, and some research courses, because those were areas that I, not that I excel in, I would consider them more my area of expertise. And Regis recognizes that, and so they put me in those areas to kind of help, their other students, to kind of moderate those courses. Some of my peers, likewise, a lot of people had positions already kind of lined up to work with, and others just kind of hit the pavement and found jobs. So everybody in my class, like I said, a small class, there were about 16 that were in the education track. All of us have some form or fashion of a faculty position that we were happy about.
So for the certification, the nurse education certification, is it something that you would say is required, or it's more of a, I guess, sort of a personal preference?
I see it. It's definitely a personal preference. And when you look at jobs, either online faculty positions or in-person faculty positions, you will always see the CNE on their job description as it being preferred. And so I really think it demonstrates mastery of that content, and it really sets you up. And I think people in the industry, definitely within academia, recognize how challenging the exam is and what your baseline knowledge has to be. And so I think if you were to compare two candidates, I would think, and I've seen it, the candidate with the CNE certification would be more would have a better preference for the position, because it's just like, I guess, for people who have like a nurse practitioner license, you wanted to have the certified nurse practitioner, not just the person who graduated from the program. You want them to demonstrate their competency. So definitely it's a preference, but I do see it moving in some way or fashion as a maybe requirement in the future.
That's good to know. James, can you speak to, when you were in the program, what kind of support and study guides did you receive from Regis and faculty?
They have weekly office hours, sometimes 2 to 3 times a week. And if I could make it, I was in there. Getting to see your faculty member, getting to know them, and really kind of getting help on that one-on-one basis was insanely helpful. because some of this content, we struggle with. We're not, it's like reading a foreign language at first, and they're really helping you kind of understand that. So definitely the office hours and the availability of the instructors was by far one of my best experiences, with the university. Smart thinking is a tool that Regis has built into their learning management system. You can submit the rubric for your assignment, the directions for your assignment, and what your written work is. You submit it into Smart Thinking, and it is reviewed by staff, and they look over the assignment to make sure that you are meeting all the objectives. They look over the rubric to make sure that you're meeting the requirements for an optimal grade. They're checking your grammar for you. And so that's great. And so it was usually within about 24 to 48 hours, they would send your file back to you with all of their recommendations and critiques on it, so that you were able to kind of learn, just learn from the process. And then, learning APA was probably the second biggest challenge that I had. But once again, the Regis librarian was awesome in that you could send your work to her or him. I think mine was a her, but I don't want to be selective. You could send your work to them, and they would look over your APA for you, and they wouldn't correct it for you. They'd tell you what you did wrong. So they took the teacher style to it. They would just say, hey, this is wrong. Go look on page so-and-so of the APA manual, and then you can figure out how to do it. So that was a great support as well. And it probably took me, I wasn't a fast learner on it, but it just took me a couple months, maybe about 3 or 4 months to get APA locked down. And then, once I had a good paper, I just always kept going back to that one to reference it, to make sure that I was kind of doing it right. But yeah, so, and really your peer partner that you have kind of sticks with you, because you take all the courses in the same track. So you're doing all your research courses together. Then when you take your education courses, we have some informatics course that you take. I'm trying to remember my degree plan off the top of my head. It's been a while, but you're taking those courses with the same people. And so you may not be in the same section, but you're doing the same content. So it was a real easy, if I didn't understand an assignment and it was outside of my office hours for my faculty member, I could just call up one of my peer partners, usually who I would bounce it off of, or I'd call somebody else, and we'd kind of talk about it over the phone and figure it out together.
Well, it's great to hear that you had that kind of support. And I know that for a lot of students, it's a learning curve, especially when it comes to paper writing. Most oftentimes, a lot of nurses, they are very clinical and very practical. So there's not too many papers that they do end up writing within their undergrad and their master's programs. And you found all the support very helpful. And do you apply any of that now within any of your coursework?
Once again, I do some online work now, and I still do some face-to-face education. But really, before I started the online program, I was teaching a little bit in online and matter, and I don't know if I appreciate it as much until I went through an online program. And now I definitely have my office hours. I have them scattered around a little bit more to kind of make them available for the students. I record some of my conversations now, and so when we have a start to a weekly session, I know how helpful it was when I was able to meet with my faculty. So I'll record those sessions and explain what the content is that we're having for the week. We'll go over the weekly objectives, so the student knows what I'm expecting from somebody, and it's really helpful. Regis kind of has the same format. I thought it was really kind of interesting. I just recorded one for one of the pathophysiology courses. I took a week and kind of described it. So what I've learned from Regis, I'm even putting into my own, academic practice to make myself available for the students and to show the support that we have for them, and to really kind of close that misnomer about being an online program, that you're not going to be successful and that you're just going to be this number or a name and just a paper that I read,
That's great to hear. What would you say would be some qualities or skills that a clinical nurse educator should possess to be effective or successful?
Definitely, you need to have patience, and it's it's just because it's always going to be challenging content. There are a lot of avenues in academia that I didn't know existed because I had always been in an adjunct faculty position. But now that I kind of see some of the rest of the world, there are a lot of accrediting processes that have to be done, curriculum development, course objectives, exam writing. So I would definitely say patience, and then definitely a familiarity and being comfortable with the content that you're going to be teaching. And I think with that, you also have to be very humble and understand that you are not going to know everything.
Those are good things to hear. So let's talk technology. What was it like learning through the online program at Regis?
It was really easy. I had already had some familiarity with online learning management systems. They call them LMS for those who are going into education. You all understand it. It really, you just had to have a computer, and that was really, it was so simple. You would just kind of log in. You could see your coursework. You had a 16-week program or 16-week courses or 8-week courses, and they were always kind of matched in pairs. So you always had 8 weeks where you weren't doing 2 courses. So it was really nice, and it was just kind of the luck of the draw how something kind of panned out. I thought it was really nice to have the 8-week course in the beginning, because then you actually got a break at the end. But I had it both ways, and it's kind of tomato. I mentioned it earlier, the discussion forums and the assignments were on this very predictable pattern. Wednesdays and Saturdays, you would just kind of go in. What I thought was really awesome about the program, I didn't like it at first, but then I learned to like it, was when you do your discussions, you couldn't see what your peers were posting before you put your post in. So you couldn't see what somebody else wrote first and then kind of get a little hint, be like, oh, okay, that's it. So you really kind of had to do your reading and know what you were talking about, or you were kind of putting yourself out there, So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then your assignments that you would submit in, it was just basically put it in either a Word document or a PDF file, and it was literally just like a drag and drop into the assignment, and it was done. It couldn't have been any easier. There were some PowerPoint presentations that we'd have to do, with some audio voiceover. If you didn't know how to do it, Regis had that covered, and they had a video in there to show you how to do it. And if you had a Mac computer, then they had the Mac version. If you got a Windows computer, they did a Windows version. So I feel like they thought of everything, to make it real simple for us.
It's good to hear. So were there any types of supporting program or resources like tech support that you had access to as well?
Yeah, there is. Regis has a 24 hour, I guess it would be 24/7, tech support. That if you have a problem, you just click it. I think it's right on the homepage of your LMS, that management system, and you just click on it. It has a little drop down box, and there was an 800 number that you could call, or there was a live chat option. And I always picked the live chat option because it just seemed to be a little bit quicker. And they would pretty much help you through anything. If you couldn't figure out, how to upload something, a screen locked up on you, which I really didn't have any real big technical issues. Probably the biggest one is, I think my dissertation PowerPoint. I was having a hard time uploading it because I didn't know how to condense the file. And there was a video for me to watch it, but I still didn't understand the video. So I had to call somebody, and then they walked me through it. And then, it just took a couple minutes. So the support is there. You just have to access it. It's all right there on your homepage. You just have to click a button, and it's there for them.
That's great. I know that that's something that a lot of students want to know about, because they figure that they're online and there's nobody there to help them, but there is support.
Yeah, no, you are not alone in this. Trust me. Yeah.
That's great. Is there any resources or things that you've learned being a student through the DNP program that you enforce within your curriculum when you're teaching it to students?
Definitely items that I did not appreciate as a student, but things that I enforce with much more rigor now are APA formatting.
Mhm.
I know everybody still kind of moans and groans when they hear about it and think about it, but the goal in everything, and I do it when I speak with BSN students, and even now some of the MSN students that I teach online, your goal is to always want them to further their education. So definitely APA format is one thing that I put a lot of rigor in, and I really enforce it. Um, Using more references, I really didn't appreciate a wide variety. I really didn't even understand about peer-reviewed journals, qualitative studies and quantitative studies. It was all a foreign language to me because I was a clinical-based nurse. I had no interest in research. I would read an article in a magazine and think, hey, that's cool. Let me try that. Not understanding how to critically read and review those elements within the article. And so I bring a lot of that into, my online courses and my in-person courses that I think is really important to read. One of the things you do learn in the doctoral program is anybody can get something published. Is whether it's good or not is, what's important. And I think it's really interesting when you're in your research courses and you start doing article critiques, you'll see good articles and bad articles. So when you start to write your own, you know what to do. And so try to bring a lot of that into my own courses because I found it really interesting. And I'm sure somebody else will find another element interesting and they'll bring it into their course,
Well, thank you for that. I did want to ask with regards to overall, the DNP Nurse Education program, do you feel that it was worth the investment?
It absolutely was. Once again, I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. I would do it all over again and then some. And I'm a huge advocate of Regis's program, just because I had a great experience, with it. And clearly I had a great experience and now I work for them. So, I feel like it's just, a testament to the program. Probably one of the best things that I thought, or when we were talking about investment wise with Regis, of the nurse faculty loan program. And it is a government grant that subsidizes and recognizes the nursing educator, the nursing faculty shortage. And so certain universities and colleges have access to the grant, and they subsidize and reimburse 85% of your loan that you have to take, or your educational cost, as long as you teach for about, I think it's 4 years afterwards. So you're really only having to pay, if you do the math, it's 15% of your, of your education. And I was probably about maybe 4 or 5 months into the program, and my advisor reached out to me and said, why aren't you doing this? Because you're in the education track, you have this, from our conversations, he knew what I was already doing. And I thought that was really admirable because Regis didn't have to tell me about that at all. They, there was nothing in it for them to say that, but they went out of their way to identify me in this crowd of students to say, hey, you're in education, you didn't go for this, loan reimbursement, you qualify for it, here you go. So definitely worth my investment because I'm only having to pay 15% of, my tuition. So that's a huge win, for anybody.
Right.
So that's how I think about the investment option of this, is that it was a no-brainer.
You're saying that for the nurse faculty loan program, they have to work 4 years after graduation. Does it have to be in a specific field or certain area in teaching?
No, I'm so glad you brought that up because that was one of the things I was nervous about. And Regis, I think once again, I'll toot their horn and tell people that this is a great opportunity for them, because the way the grant or the loan repayment works, you have to work a full-time credit load, which in most universities are going to be 24 hours an academic year. So 12 credits in the fall, 12 credits in the spring. certain universities have the ability to say it has to be a full-time program. You have to get all of your credits from one university, or you have to be in a part-time position here and a part-time position here. So some universities have some very strict rules and regulations. Regis, they care, but they don't care. And that's what was amazing, is they don't care if you get 3 credits from teaching online here, you get 4 credits, you know, doing a clinical rotation here in person, and then like you fly out for the summer, you go someplace. As long as you get your 24 credits within the year, right, Regis is completely fine with it. And then they consider that as satisfying the requirements of your loan for that year. In academia, it's hard to find a full-time faculty position without potentially having to, you know, move somewhere. You know, jobs are definitely out there, but are they necessary where we live? No. And so I think that flexibility with Regis, I'm so glad you brought that up, Alicia, because that was one of the deciding factors, because I was a little nervous. Like I didn't want to think I was getting this loan and then have them take it away from me. But Regis, that's their decision, that their nursing program made of how they can repay that loan. And so there's so much flexibility.
Right. And you worked with somebody to ensure that all the fine details of the grant program were met in the application as well?
Yes, ma'am. There is a loan advisor. They walk you through the process every year that you're in the program for 2 years, or else I went through it in 2 years. You fill the paperwork out, and you have an entrance interview where they'll work with you to fill out the paperwork. Then you have when you submit it the next year, they'll call you up and they'll do it face-to-face, because it's like filling out a mortgage, you know, like I don't know where all the numbers go, and there's time frames. And then you have an exit interview. And when you finish that, then they contact me once a year. There's a computer program now that runs, you know, all the software and the paperwork. And every year I just have to gather the documents to prove that, I think there's 4 forms I have to fill out once a year that just prove that I have a full-time employment, because I'm meeting my 24 credits. I think you have to ask a form that says, please pay my loan, you know, something like that. There's like some silly forms you have to just kind of sign and date, but there's only one form that you have to submit that shows, yes, I have met my credit hours. And if you are getting them from different universities or different institutions, you just have to have them sign the form just saying, hey, yeah, like Jamie taught here these 6 credits. And it's that simple. And then you just download it or upload it into this file, and then it forgives your loan for the year. And then you do it all again the next year. And like I said, after 4 years, 85% of your loan is paid back. And then that remaining 15%, which is not a lot. I mean, I won't do the math for people. They can all do their own. You have the option to, just like any other normal loan, you can pay it up front, or if you want to do it over 10 years, 5 years, 15 years, whatever the interest rate is, like you've got that option to do that.
And I definitely agree. It's a great opportunity it's a great incentive for the nurse educators, because we do know about the shortage. And so it's a great opportunity for them to take advantage of advancing themselves academically, but getting the financial support as well.
Yeah.
Well, Jamie, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your story and your experiences about the DNP program and Regis. There will be a copy of the recording available for everybody. And if they have any questions, they're welcome to reach out to the admissions office and speak with one of our graduate advisors. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.